Hey, Gatsby here, coping with the very real threat that the only videos I'll ever get any views on are gonna have to be related to Digimon. But with the completion of the most recent Kamen Rider series, Kamen Racist Bathhouse Brothers, I figure what's a better time than now for me to explain how, despite being composed of 3 interesting storylines, Kamen Rider Revice fell short of expectation. And yes, light spoilers ahead for those interested. Being the first time I've talked about Kamen Rider on the channel, I feel obliged to lay some foundation. But in short, Kamen Rider is the sister series of Super Sentai. Before you start laughing at me for watching Japanese Power Rangers, the average American watches 31 flavors of cape shit on a dozen different streaming services, so they can be pissed off at a GTA 6 model for doing something completely in character because the source material is a fucking comic book. And while Super Sentai's target audience is like 12 years old, Kamen Rider targets a slightly older, more mature demographic of 13-year-olds. Similarly to Game of Thrones, Kamen Rider is willing to kill off characters and provide deep commentary about living in a society. Except in Kamen Rider, it's to provide enough copium to convince viewers that they're not watching a toy commercial, where in America, George R.R. Martin is trying to convince you you're not watching gay porn. Of course, this is a gross oversimplification of everything I've referenced thus far, but it is a good starting point for people who are interested in watching a show that Toei refrains from supporting in the West. Revice is a celebratory 50th anniversary season that works as a sort of anthology, being composed of 3 overlapping stories. On paper, it sounds like a great idea to shake up the modern Rider format, traditionally starting with a Christmas catalog collectathon, followed by a mid-season upgrade to topple some mid-ranged assholes, meander around a bit to flesh out side characters and establish a true big bad evil guy, coming to the conclusion of a final fight, leaving the heroes without the added responsibility of strapping $500 of collectible plastic to their waist. Revice takes this pattern and repeats it for each of the 3 main riders in Daiji, Sakura, and Iki. Let's talk about the middle child, Daiji, first. Daiji is a part of Phoenix, a military complex set up to defeat the mid-season antagonists of the Deadmans. Hiromi acts as a secondary rider to Daiji. He's the first person to attempt to use the Revice driver, but is unable to. Daiji attempts it as well, but is also unable to, requiring Iki to take the main stage sporting his glossy gender reveal color palette. But Daiji does get his time, eventually changing into Kamen Rider Evil, where his inner Hot Topic enthusiast takes over. And after several episodes of his alter beating up on Iki, he finally becomes Kamen Rider Live by stopping the voices in his head. Ultimately, what made Daiji an interesting character for me was his wicked sense of humor and warped sense of justice, causing him to lose faith in the Igarashi ability to stop GIF. This is brought on by a combination of watching others get defeated and then the lack of the cooler Daiji keeping him balanced. And after a half season of him working with someone having way too much fun acting, he gets his final upgrade after realizing he was being a dick, coaxing Daiji the Hedgehog out of his room. And it's a mostly satisfying closure to a character arc, putting GIF in the gay baby jail with the help of the Magnet Man. And honestly, as much as people shit on Daiji, I think a lot of it was misplaced. Watching a character bounce between the 2 wolves inside of him was pretty good. I still feel like we needed more moments of him coming to terms with the implications that come with bending the knee to GIF, but Daiji's complex sense of right and wrong in the face of an extension level event played out pretty interesting in how differently he processed it than Iki. And oh, wait a minute, evil spelled backwards. Right, so Sakura really doesn't fit in this show. Wait, no, stop, calm down, let me explain. Sakura is one of the first female writer protagonists I legitimately believe could hold her own as a main character, just not in Revice. Her character arc was straightforward enough. She gets her belt from Aguilera, fights her way through some background scenes as the Karate Kid, and then goes into the basement. And from that point forward, it becomes glaringly obvious that she only exists to progress the B-plot between the former Deadman characters and The Weeknd. Also, now that I'm finally talking about The Weeknd, I'm just glad to say that we got rid of those problematic costumes for so much more appropriate designs that just ooze character. Biggest issue here, though, is that Sakura and Aguilera feel like they're in a completely different show, clashing with the tone of the remainder of Revice in all the worst ways. Especially when Tamaki and the Hiromi hand-me-down join in on the antics. Her biggest contribution to the main story is trying to stop Daiji and Iki from fighting each other, but I think that role could have been helmed by a retooling of the mother character whose main job was just to stand around and smile at people. Or just remove it! Put the 2 brothers on the main stage fighting for similar causes from different perspectives, and really thrive off those differences. Sakura's usually just playing off of Aguilera so that we can meet the Reiwa-era P-Bandai unique belt requirement and advertising the second best part of Revice, Lovekov, who, through her personal story arc, ends up realizing that she can't handle everything on her own and is rewarded with one of the best looking final forms of the season. I'm sure there's a good character in here somewhere, but in a show struggling with too many half-told stories, Sakura regularly put me on 1.5. Alright, let's talk about the main character, Iki, finally. When we're not following Daiji tackling his inner goth IHOP employee, Sakura stumbling into basements, Old Man Spider-Man, or the weird fake family, Iki takes the main stage with Vice, a demon who signed the same contract with Iki as he did with the people in charge of writing for Iki. Returning to the beginning of the show, Daiji couldn't bring himself to use the Revice driver, so Iki selflessly rushed in to save the day. This was done to establish that he's a family man, as well as someone with little hesitation when given the chance to help. Because of these traits, his family titles him the #1 busybody of Japan. During the Collectathon portion of the show, a Monster of the Week tells Ikki that he helps people who might not actually want help while simultaneously ignoring the consequences. And in the context of Kamen Rider, this is an interesting stance because sometimes people are just down bad and they want to be sacrificed to the giant stone Kuchi. In what's probably my favorite set of episodes for this character, we get a look into Ikki's past as a soccer enjoyer. And due to the previously mentioned contract, he forgot about injuring one of his friends in a game. And this was a key moment in his life that catapulted his selfless desire to help people because of the opportunities he believed to have caused his friend to miss out on. During this time, he learns the cost of his contract, slowly forgetting his own past experiences as he transforms into Revice. And this ties back to what I believe is the golden thread of Revice, the mystery of Genta and Masumi. And I'll refrain from saying too much, but the interactions between them and their sons Ikki and George and the demons are what I think is definitively the best of what this show had to offer. The D-Stream and Juga drivers being the final payoff for that story was great, but I can comfortably say that I wish we would have gotten more from their story. But that leaves me with a different issue. There's 4 or 5 major Big Finish moments that all felt like they needed to be quickly rushed out the door before Kamen Rider Fortnite started up. Once the final boss of the show, GIF, was defeated, I legitimately thought they'd close up the season early, similar to 0-1. Instead, we had the Juga story to tie up a few loose ends that felt like it would have slotted nicely into a post-season movie. I've always thought most Rider shows could probably be condensed into 30 solid episodes, but with as much time as put into the suits, stories, and extra movies and marketing, there's not a chance in hell that would ever happen because at its core, it is a glorified toy commercial and Reiwa demands more belts. But I think that's the biggest shortcoming of Revice. Big story elements like Ikki and his memory loss seem to get glossed over for a good amount of the story up until the end because of how many different stories there were to tell. Credit where credit is due, the soccer episode addressed it masterfully and is one of my favorite episodes of the season because of it. It is mentioned periodically and the payoff in the finale was great, but I wish there were more moments like this. And on a bit of a side tangent, Ikki's heavy reiteration got me thinking about Darker Than Black, an anime from 2007, where characters had a cost to use their powers, putting a limit on effectiveness with the exception of the main character and his loophole. In Revice, it kind of feels like the opposite, with Ikki losing his memory while Daiji just has to deal with a TikTok thirst trap and Sakura having to protect the snake. I just would have appreciated everyone getting the same rulebook on how to train your demon, but apparently that was a little too much to ask. And I know Daiji frustrated a lot of viewers understandably, but I did like the direction they took him in. Through the director's manipulation and the loss of Shadow Daiji, his perspective was influenced because he really does live in a society. And I stand by it, I think Sakura definitely drew the shortest straw, having to work with the creepy puppet guy from O's. And even if I don't think the season was great, I do think there was gold to be found in this show. Genta and Matsumi was peak fucking Kino. And even the creepy puppet guy in Akaishi offered additional perspectives of the concept of a less functional family, adding to the central theme of the show being family. As much as I'd love to say, well, if George and Hiromi were the main writers, I'm not going to go there because any headcanon you can personalize will always be your personal favorite Kamen Rider show. But I'd say the show's worth the watch if you're not turned away from the CGI people stacking animal forms, and you'll get what in my opinion is a pretty middle-of-the-line season. But let me know if you enjoyed this. Maybe I'll talk about a Sentai season because I really don't want to become a Digimon YouTuber. Guys, please help me. I need to get out of...
Well, then, glory